Hi everybody, welcome to another Women's Network event. I'm really pleased to say we've got Kay White here today to give us a great talk, and we'll have some Q&A at the end as well. So thank you all for coming. We've got over 800 people signed up on the webcast as well, and we've also got Madrid. They should be here as well, signing in from Telepresence. You can see them there. Give them a wave. So we've had a great year so far. So this is actually our 5th event now of the year. So we're really coming together. And you'll obviously agree that I think we're going from strength to strength. Obviously in March we had the Men on Board event. We had I Can, You Can, We Can in July. And we also had Jenny Garrett as an evening event back in July also. So I won't delay. As ever, you can post your questions for Kay using hashtag BTWomen and do that on Twitter during the talk. And then obviously during the Q&A we'll address those. So just to introduce Kay, so we're really privileged. Kay is the #1 best-selling author of The A to Z of Being Understood. She's a business communication expert, and she draws upon 20 years of international insurance broking that she actually got to director level, so plenty of experience there for us to listen to today. So without further delay, let me welcome Kay to the stage.
Thank you, Adelaide. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to check that Alistair's turned me on, and you know what I mean by that, because you can hear me. How would it be if you were to imagine walking into a room where you've just been introduced by someone with a bit of a billing, and you check that everyone can hear you, and you hear a voice that says, Kay, your pitch and tone, I can hear everything, but I'm thinking the subject is boring. That happened to me when I spoke at the Austrian embassy. I was invited to go to the embassy. My book was being taught in a business school out in Austria, and the students came over to have a tour of London and to meet me. I'm going to share with you what I said in that moment as we go into our talk. But the point of some of the things that I want to share with you is there are these moments where you get to choose how you respond, how you react, whether you let that person take your power away. So instead of crumbling, I said something else, and I'm going to share with you what that is when someone said that to me, from probably right over on the other side of where the control room is, that far. So I'm just going to check with I have my trusty clicker. I'll talk today, and I'm very mindful of the time. I have a clicker there, a clock there, and a clock here, and I think Adelaide has a trapdoor mechanism for me as well. So I promise you I'm very respectful of your time and also your precious energy as well. So I want to make sure that what we pull up together today is going to be useful for you, but you can go off and use it probably this very afternoon. So the talk title, I chose my words very carefully. Communication, we all do it whether we want to or not, but the essence is effective of communication. How to do it. Influence is about persuasion and being able to help people do things because they want to rather than because you tell them to. And confidence, people are always looking, particularly women, for more confidence. And I truly believe that confidence is a byproduct. I don't think that confidence is anything, I need more confidence, I wish I had more confidence. Confidence is actually a byproduct of all sorts of other things that go on, your self-belief, your worthiness, where you hold yourself. People often give you credit for being confident when you're not. But if you sort of do certain things, your body starts to respond to you. So communicating and influence with confidence, style and ease, it does absolutely affect your career, but it also affects your life. I was chatting to a couple of women earlier who were saying, actually, this is really interesting for me, not only career-wise, but at home, or with my family, or with some of my friends who kind of maybe push me about a bit, or sometimes I end up doing lots of things I didn't want to necessarily do, but I found myself saying yes. So that's where we're heading today. And what I'm going to share with you, I have two secrets to share with you to do more. I'm not one for great loads of words on slides. Who kind of looks at words, huge amounts of words on slides and zones out? I'm sure most of you are nodding. I did hear once from someone who worked for Arthur Andersen's before they became Accenture, I think, that 17 words is the maximum on the slide. Now, I know that you'll have seen slides with more than 17 words on them. A couple of mine have a few more, but they're intentional. It's not just loads of spreadsheets, because actually people don't really read them. It's much more effective to have a message and be yourself in that moment and hand out the handouts for people to read later. Two things to do more of, and why. 2 banana skins, I call them. Things that will trip you up, that you could step over and you can understand what you're doing in the moment and then maybe do something else instead. And one thing to do straight away, which we will do in the room, and for those of you who are watching around the world or maybe watching the recording, I would put it to you to also do this in the moment that you're watching this, because it changes your energy. And so this is something that we do that's actually a physical thing, and we're going to do it together. So that's where we're heading today, and we have this delicious chunk of time. We'll build on some questions. I have someone who might be telling me things down here where the questions are coming from around the world. So if you're watching this and you want to ask a question or make a comment to be part of this, I would welcome that, and I know all of us in the room would as well. So just to share with you, what makes me stand here in front of you? Why me? Why now? So what? You could well be thinking. Well, I have realized that what I do in my business, which I started in 2006, is I help women understand and show their value, not their to-do list. If you lead with your to-do list, or I've done this, people zone you out. If you lead with the value of what you do and understand what the value of what you do is and how to express it, people listen to you. And that naturally leads you to more income and opportunity, promotion opportunities. So that is what I actually do, and I do that through listening to words, through understanding the way, and this isn't just necessarily in English. I understand there's an energy about how we put ourselves across. There's obviously cultural differences always, but there's an energy in how we express ourselves. And so that is what I do in my business, and it is a gift, if you will. We all have them. I've actually worked out what it is that I do and how I do it so that I can help other women. It's no good otherwise, it's, you're keeping it to yourself. Do please join us and just settle in. So my focus these days now is really, and I was saying to a couple of you who I met outside, now's never been a better time to be a woman in business, putting herself forward and saying, okay, I'll handle that, or actually I'm ready for that, or actually when that comes up, I'd like to be considered for that. This might sound pretty confronting, but actually it needs to be. But it's never been a better time politically either to do this. It's a really great opportunity time because women and our success at work is a political hot potato that's being written about every single day. And so companies are naturally more open to considering how you can be, how you can be accelerated. So putting yourself forward and putting yourself in the frame. Because so many women, this is a trait, wait to be asked, rather than ask and expect something to happen. Well, they didn't ask me. I can't believe I wasn't invited to do that. Why aren't I on that committee? So I will often say, well, did you put yourself forward? Did you say you'd be interested? And so often that's a no. So this is, again, this time for stepping up and stepping out, giving yourself permission, not waiting for anybody else to do that. So who believes that when you look at other people, their path was like that? Street success, it's very easy for you. It's all very easy for you. You'll see other people, you'll see your boss, and you'll assume. I would say that in most cases, it twists and turns and looks much more like that one on my left, your right. Dead ends, helter-skelter moments, snakes and ladders. I've certainly had my version of that. And for those of you who are just starting out in your career, I really acknowledge that in your life itself, you'll have had those moments. They're part of your story. You'll have had, grades you didn't get, or a pass you needed that you didn't get, or someone was supposed to do something that didn't happen. We all have that, and I think what's so helpful, Lily Tomlin said, and you see that quote, the road to success is always under construction. Just because something didn't work doesn't mean to say it has to be the end of it. You pick yourself up again and start again. So I most definitely have had a twisty-turny roller coaster time, and I still do. I still do. I can't afford, just because you run your own business, and I promise you, for those of you who have attempted or married to or have friends who run their own businesses, there is no better personal development exercise than running your own business, because you are challenged and questioned every day. Nothing automatically happens without your input. So I definitely know what that looks like. The road to success is under construction. And I want to say, if you remember nothing else from today, you're under construction as well. You're not the finished article. Why should you assume that just because you haven't got what you wanted today, you can't still keep going for it? So just as a little bit of background, I started my career, as Adelaide said, in Willis. And I started as a secretary looking after overseas visitors. And I worked my way up through various snakes and ladders to become a divisional director in the global property department. So we were negotiating contracts, multi-million-dollar contracts all around the world on industrial risks, so coal mines, airlines, and lots of stuff that I didn't understand. But what's interesting along the way, you build these relationships if you're prepared to ask and say, I don't understand. And I didn't always say I didn't understand. I used to sit there sometimes thinking, oh my gosh, what are they talking about? But I've learned over the years that the more you say, you know what, I'm not 100% on that, or actually before I get going on that, I'd just like a quick word with you. And you'll find that so many women in the room, or men in the room as well, don't understand either. But you don't have to always sort of think it's a weakness. If anything, it's a strength when you speak up and say, you know what, I'm not clear on that, and before we get ourselves tangled up, I'd like some assistance. So let me just take a sip of water. This, by the way, who here often is on conference calls? This is a really cool piece of kit, a sippy cup. I learned from an early mentor of mine that when you're speaking, you don't need to sort of slug and glug and sip water over yourself. But also, I run lots of conference calls with groups of women and clients. And having a sippy cup, A, if you knock it, you don't throw it all over the computer and swear. And B, they can't hear you drinking. So I have a sippy cup with intention, and also it doesn't ruin your lipstick. So that's an aside for the men who might be in the room. Hey. So what I realized as I was going along, and this is something else to share with you, that you will have a system. If you're successful in an area, and even if you're not successful in an area and you're missing a train, for example, you have a system that helps you miss a train. There's a strategy. You leave a bit late, you don't know exactly what the train was, you don't get yourself organized. That's a system. And when you have a system for your successful things that you're actually really good at, where you put blueprints together or run meetings, to actually understand what you do and be able to be clear about it actually helps you to help other people. And so one of the things I've discovered, which is how I'm able to stand in front of you, is that I have a system that I absolutely work through, and not necessarily linear, but that's what works when women are looking to be promoted, appointed, move jobs. There's a system to it. And when one realizes that you have a system, it's a lot easier to find yourself in it. It's like, okay, we need to look at this. And I'm going to share with you what my system is. And just the words will remind you of some of the importance of these things if you're interested in them. And one of the things I learned along the way is that I'm very good at putting together, turning big chunks of information into smaller pieces, systemizing it, breaking it down. And that's what I did in my career, and that's what I'm doing now in my own business. So again, understanding what you're good at and how to be able to replicate it. You turn it into something else. So if you're very good at putting together presentations, to be able to say, well, look, let me teach you, let me show, within the department, let me show you how I do this. Let me just show you what actually has to happen. Because then you're starting to add value and also building your own, personal value somewhere else other than what you just, it's just what I've always done, which is what so many women say. So these are some of the things, and it's interesting, just chatting with a couple of you outside, that I have really consciously done in my career. I've come forward and asked for things in my career. I wanted to go and live in Paris. I wanted to learn French, so I paid for part of it myself. Then my boss was like, hey, okay, this is quite cool. If you want to do this, and if you give yourself X many months, we'll support you and have private lessons. I've also wanted to learn to be a better presenter, so I took myself off on a presenting course. I've invested in myself, and I put a picture of that red bus up there, because a phrase I often say is, are you driving your own bus in your career? Are you waiting for someone else to give you something or do something, or are you driving your own bus? Now, I promise you that I have spoken at countless experiences like this, and I spoke at a big accountancy association. And one woman said, Kay, I'm not even in the terminal. I'm so far away from driving my own bus. So for those of you who are thinking, yeah, actually, I don't really know that I'm driving, I'm waiting. These days, if you think to yourself, I need to be better at this, or actually, I wouldn't wait to be invested in yourself. It's so easy. We were talking about it just before, wanting to actually boost your skills. Don't wait for someone else to give you permission or tell you it's the right time, or we need to send you on a leadership course. If you want something in an area, then it's time for you to invest it in yourself, because you're investing in your future career. And that's one of the secrets, that when you hear other people and how they got places, or how they accelerated that much faster, it's because they drove their own bus in this area. I also have travelled quite a bit. I wanted to learn how to take my business online, so I went to California. I didn't want to wait till someone went to California, learnt how to do it, came back and taught me how to do it here. I went to California and learnt from the source. So my business has been online and products, all these things, from actually investing, well, let's say tens of thousands in my own development to be able to then help other people. But can you imagine the personal development you have along the way? And so often we think it's the touchy-feely stuff and, oh, I don't know, that I need to go off and understand about, personal leadership. Well, actually, it does a huge amount for your confidence day to day. I really do recommend that you look at, actually, where am I a little bit lacking in an area? And if there isn't anything immediately here, then it's like, well, where else can I find it? At the same time, it's only going to help me further on your own journey. And this is a summary of, having qualifications, having more experience, bringing that experience back, having creativity, looking at what you're able to do and connecting it to what the company is doing as well. So you're adding more value. Just dropping a little pebble in the pond saying, oh yeah, that's interesting, Chris. I was on a course at the weekend on presentation skills, and I'm really interested. I'd like to be put forward for that. I'd like to test myself. Can you hear how in that moment you're telling whoever Chris is that, yeah, I've invested in myself, yeah, I'm stepping forward and doing that, and yeah, I'm kind of prepared to stretch myself. People pay attention to that. So, this is the system, and why now? The linking system, I call it, and there are 7 steps in it. And I promise you, how I found my system, I have a picture of me, and I ought to probably include it in my slides, surrounded by Post-it notes. I mean, surrounded by Post-it notes. Pulling out all of the things that I just, you need to do this, and you need to do that, and then I could start to see a pattern. And this is the thing, again, I know you've been in meetings where you're brainstorming, but to actually start to see a pattern of what you do and how you're good, what you're doing, what's good, and if you had to give it to somebody as your last breath, what would you do? That was kind of how I approached it. And I had a whole wall at home of Post-it notes. My husband came in and thought I'd lost the plot. But suffice to say, I boiled it down into these systems. And this is what the linking system stands for. Language and positioning. The language that you use. And I don't just mean English. I mean the actual energy behind the words you're using. For those of you watching around the world, really understanding when you say these things, what are the other things that come up? When you use certain words and when you don't, and what the effect is. And positioning, how you position things. How you actually precursor something. So instead of saying, I'm going to speak at BT today, I would position it as in a group of women from all around the world, the Women's Network, looking to boost membership. And so I'm really excited to be speaking at BT today. That's a bit of positioning while I'm doing it. Can you hear it? It's much more interesting and effective. The second, the I is for intention. What do you actually want to have happen? So many times we tend to be a bit like, bouncing around, just showing up and not really sure why we're there. I will often say, well, what's your intention? When you send that email or when you go to that meeting, what's your intention? What do you want to have happen? What has to happen? How are you going to prepare for it? Can you hear? It's very intentional. And we tend to bounce from one thing to another and not be prepared. The N is for noticing. Noticing what's going on, what's happening in the market, what's happening in the environment, what's happening in the industry that you're talking about. Really being mindful and noticing what you notice. So many times it's like there's all these clues flashing at you and we don't pay attention or we don't write them down. We wish we'd remembered. The K is for keeping to the point. So many women particularly feel that we have to, what you have to understand and what you need to know. And how many of you have heard that or either maybe said it and not just said, you know what, this isn't working and if we don't do something we're going to lose money. That's pretty pointed. And then be prepared to explain how and why. Not the, well, I've been noticing and I'm not sure whether you know yet, and taking all the emphasis away. So there's a way of doing that as well, and it's in my book actually, P for point. There's a couple of models that you're able to sort of slot your words into that help you be more pointed without being rude. The I, the second I, is for influence and persuasion. How to understand what influence and persuasion is and how to be more persuasive yourself. Then the other N is for now how. This is where my systems come in. How to put a presentation together, how to run a meeting, how to show up on a conference call, how to leave an email, send an email that people actually open and read and respond to versus just go into their kind of, plasma screen somewhere else and another universe. Voicemails that people actually phone back, how to put hooks in what you send out so that people actually respond to you. So that is, again, a system. And you hear how I would have been surrounded by Post-it notes from all of these things. And the G is for grace, style, and ease, which has given me, as an really corporate woman working with I was one of, at the time, I think 5 women who were working in the actual business versus the support, with probably over 40 men. And not that that was ever anything that it was a choice, but it was definitely a different energy that I was in. And I have given myself permission to use the G of grace, style, and ease to bring into my business the power of colour, the power of how you put yourself across, the importance of how you look and sound, and posture, and how you actually hold yourself. It's really important. You can have all the bells and whistles and all the smarty pants things to say, but if people don't believe you, you have to work that much harder. So I have had my colours done. It was one of the best £100 I ever spent. And of course it feeds out into my business and the colours I choose for everything. And again, this is one of these little subtleties. Not everyone has to know about it, but you quietly go off and do it. Because I've sat in a couple of bank receptions where it looks like I'm going to a funeral. Everyone has walked past in black or grey. In our room today, we have quite a bit of colour, but it's a very easy default to wear black, and it actually doesn't suit very many people when you actually understand skin tone and eye colour. So if you need permission to go and see what colours work for you, I would really invest in it. It saves you buying something that you think, hey, I like the dress that Kay wore, but it looks crappy on you because it's not your skin tone and your eye colour. So, as I mentioned, I have written a book. A lot of people said to me, when are you going to write some of this stuff down? You're kind of, talk all of these different ideas and things to say and share. So I wrote a book in 2011, and I dared myself. You know when you kind of think, if I was to do that, this is how I often find that I do things. If I was to do that, I dare myself. I think, well, if I was to do it, so I haven't quite committed yet. And then I mapped out my book on a plane. And I'm very honoured that Lois Frankel, amongst other people, endorsed it. And Lois Frankel wrote a brilliant book. And she wrote it, I think it was in the early 2000s, called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. Who's heard of Nice Girls Don't Get? Not many of you. You're in for a treat. I would recommend, Lois wrote in 2014, she updated it, Nice Girls Still Don't Get the Corner Office. And in there is a survey, and you can find yourself where you're at. Some of her ideas are a little outdated because, there's social media and there's how you show up much more on telecasters and things like this. But the point of how you actually put yourself across, and she said that I have, a tidbit on each page, which is really how I wrote it. So there are copies outside if any of you would like some, and if we don't have enough copies, we'll happily take your details, and £10, and they can be signed by the author, of course, which would be an honour. So one of the things I will share with you, because it's very easy to have somebody up the front with a clicker who's, pretending it's all marvellous. I would say to you, if we went around the room, everyone in here has something that has taken you off track. And if you haven't, or you can't think about it yet, you will have. It's just what happens. And so it's very easy, again, to look at a speaker and think, oh, well, it's all right for her. But actually, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And you don't know what's going on behind the scenes with your colleagues and your customers behind, across the desk. You just don't know. And I share this with you to remind you of this empathy that we need to remind ourselves of. It's not all, which is how I found myself in my career. And my thing to share with you is when I was 16, and you would never know this, but when I was 16, I had ovarian cancer. And when I was 16, which is a long time ago, 30-odd years ago, chemotherapy was really experimental. I am very lucky to be alive. And I don't say this to impress you. I say it to impress upon you. You don't know. I don't have children, because a lot of people look at me and say, oh, you had this long career and you built this business. Well, I don't have children because I couldn't have children. But I've known it since I was 16. We could have adopted, but it wasn't the route I chose to go. But what I'm sharing with you is you don't know what's going on for other people, and it's so very easy to judge them from a place of not understanding. And that's okay. We all know this kind of logically, but actually energetically you don't. And the more real I've become and sharing this more openly, because it's not something you normally would talk about. That's me with virtually no hair, and I weigh just under 12 stone. And at that point, I was 8.5 stone. And I can't imagine what my parents must have gone through. The witch's hat is to remind me to share with you a turning point where at Willis I started to become a character that I didn't start to like. And a number of women will be able to empathise with this as well. I started to behave more like a witch or something that rhymes with it. I could feel it. I was surrounded by swearing. It's maybe more politically correct now, but at the time it really was hair curling. Swearing and come on now, I want it now. All of that. And I started to be affected by that. It was kind of a sink or swim. So I started to become more like that myself. And I could feel it in myself. I could feel it in my personal life. I could feel it in how I was behaving. And my turning point where the tracks went like this was I was, I think, 37 at the time. And someone came into the office and tied a big helium balloon next to my colleague. My colleague sat next to me, wasn't in yet. A big helium balloon for his 40th. And I remember that moment looking and thinking, I cannot be sitting in this chair or with a 40th balloon in like 2.5 years' time, feeling like this. I can't. That was my moment. And this is what I would again say to you, without going all tactical with you, pay attention to those signs, because there is that thing about the feather. You get brushed by a feather, that was the balloon. Then you get thrown a brick, which kind of bounces off you, and then you get hit by a truck where you just lose it, or you are asked to move on. So pay attention to the feathers. That balloon for me was a true feather. I had that moment, I just thought, okay, I have to do something. And it was within probably a month that I resigned, and I planned, again, the sort of strategy of what would happen next. 3 months' notice, how much money that would look like, what would happen. And it was only by trusting myself and taking a chance on myself that I'm not sitting there now. Who's to say what would have happened? But I know that I was not liking myself. And for those of you who can feel that, it's something for you to drive your bus about, take responsibility for. So this is what so many of my clients say to me, because I work with women both privately and in groups. I speak, I host events. There's lots of different ways of accessing all of this. And obviously I've written a book. So I've really done my research because, of course, I'm like a sponge, and I'm able to, one person will say something to me and I'll be able to say completely anonymously, do you know, a client was sharing with me, or a woman I met at an event was saying this, and we help each other by sharing. So I sort of find myself like a sort of repository for being able to share with you. And these are so many things that women say, am I invisible? People say to me in meetings, did you just say something? Or someone said to me earlier, I'll have an idea on a telecall, and it won't land properly, because 2 minutes later someone else will say, oh yes, it's John here, and bloody blast, exact same idea, and it's gone, and it's his and it's not yours. How many of you have noticed that sometimes in your work? There's lots of noddings. I'm reassuring you, there's lots of noddings. Why did he get that? Why didn't I get offered that? So you can hear that you'll find yourself, and it isn't me just throwing spaghetti at the wall, I really am understanding. And a lot of that used to be me until I learned how to and how not to. I just touched my microphone, sorry, Alistair. How I learned what I'm actually doing that works and what to avoid. So this is something to share with you that came out of a kind of, well, where do you find yourself in this? These are what I call my power circles to success. It's like a safe combination, if you look at that. And it leads to income and rewards, recognition, value, confidence. Carefully crafting your communication. Science of influence and persuasion I've talked about. Joining the dots, not just thinking you're in a silo, thinking, how can I make this relevant to the other person? You'll always find a relevancy bridge. If you want to toot about something, how do I make it relevant? I always think about that as joining the dots. Let's join the dots between what you want to say and what the other person needs to hear. Building and leveraging connections. Who here knows people who build relationships with you on the day they need you? First is along the way. Well, we don't like people like that, and people don't like it if we're like that. So I'm really always saying to my clients, consciously look at, following up with people, thanking people, actually acknowledging that someone's done a good job. Can I come I'd love to buy you a coffee and hear how you did that or what you did, because it's really interesting. This kind of energy of putting yourself out, which of course leads to you being on the radar. Because it doesn't matter how many people you know, if they don't know you, so what? It's really, how can I be seen? How can I offer my services? How can, like Adelaide, I think it's very strategic to be part of a network and be running it because a lot of people know you. And I'm not saying you did that for that, but it's absolutely what happens, putting yourself forward for committees and offering your services. Often it will be, actually, thanks, we'll let you know, but you've put yourself forward. Going to networking events, being seen, popping up on calls and actually making a point of making sure you say something so that you are on the radar on that call versus just present. And asking and expecting to receive, as I said to you, rather than waiting for permission. And using your skills and your story, your unique skills and story, being more aware of what it is I'm good at, asking people. You put me forward for that thing. What made you put me forward to it? Why me? What do you see that I'm good at? It would really help me. Because so often our best skills are too close to us, we can't see them, they're here, at the end of our nose. So before I leap forward, I'm going to invite you, because I'm very mindful of time, just to take a minute to turn to the person nearest to you, and just take a minute to, what's come up for you, just share. And I'm going to invite the person with the longest hair to go first. Okay, so a minute to talk to each other. What's come up for you so far? Okay. I'm going to invite you to, if you can hear my voice, please say shh. Ooh. That sometimes works. It's a very subtle way. I'm not going to ask you because we're going to have a Q&A and I'm going to hang around as well. I'd love to be with you in here and have a coffee together. But things start to come up, and it doesn't have to be a light bulb moment, but there's stuff in there for you already. I know that some of you have been nodding and writing down. And so just to share with you that this is the ultimate outcome of all of that, being able to be seen, to be valued, to be appointed, to be included. So often women don't feel that they are, they don't feel that they're heard. And that's what I've learned, and that's certainly how I felt myself, hence the whole kind of the style that I started to develop myself. And this is truly what you're able to do. Ask for what you're worth, talk about what you're worth, talk about what your work does, be able to negotiate for yourself about a salary rather than wait and see what happens, to actually bounce back for something and say, you know what, actually after what I've contributed and when I know it's done, this is what I'd like to consider, when can we have a conversation about that? It doesn't always work the first time, but it's a conversation. This is the point. It's not just you being passive. This is what I want for you to remember. So these are some of the places where, again, scaring myself at times, writing, I didn't know I could, putting myself out there. And again, being able, I was actually featured in Glamour magazine, which I love, based on the fact I do love glittery things and colour, in an article called The Nice Girl's Guide to Playing Hardball. And again, it's not about being someone you don't like or someone, dressed up as a man in drag. That really isn't my style. It's not what I would advocate. And women don't like you and the men don't like you either. Would the smart man in the room agree with me? There you go. Thank you. So these are just some of the things that we do. And one of the things that happened recently, I introduced a CV surgery. And I'm not, again, this is about, it's about having the confidence, putting your LinkedIn profile up, being able to be seen, to actually not actually need it on the day you have it. VIP days, and annually each year, and Caroline, my trusty assistant there, knows and is with me throughout, I host a 3-day live event for women where we come together. And a number of women come privately. It's not a corporate event run by corporates. It's run by me. We bring together, I bring my colour specialist, I bring a photographer who shows you how to stand in a photograph so that you like the photograph. All of these things that add to your confidence, as well as how you actually talk about what you do, how you understand the value of what you do. And women learn, as we know, from each other so easily. And so whilst I'm there as the host, I'm not there telling you everything. It's very much an interactive experience. And that's just a snapshot of some of the things we do. Because, strategies to earn more money, let's talk about it. It's like, show me the money. We're not here always to have fun. It's, your personal value is an exchange. And so I'm very open about how often do you talk about money? How often do you talk about your salary and your bonuses and how it's going to shape out for you rather than passive? The word sparkle, introducing that into my business, was a conscious decision. It was quite a risk with a corporate background. We're not invited to sparkle that much really at work. But I don't mean that in the way of wearing sequins all the time. I really mean it about shining, allowing yourself to be seen, allowing yourself to wear, if red really suits you or orange really suits you, to actually show up in this way, to actually talk about value. We're attracted to things that shine a bit brighter. And so often we dumb ourselves down and try and play small. And that costs us, both energetically, and it costs us with what we're earning, our earning power, which leads into your family. So I'm going to share with you these tips, which I know you'll be able to use straight away, pulled from the system, from language. Then two things, most of them are from language actually, 4 of them are from language. I'm also going to share with you from my system about now how, something to do with boundaries. How many of you would say, just as a sort of little finger show, that you struggle with saying no or having boundaries? You're not alone. Being able to say no without saying no. So I have something for you that, based on most of you saying yes, that you'll be interested in, and Caroline will be there for you for that. And then we're going to pull something from the Grace, Style and Ease piece. So, positioning boundaries for you, for those of you who said you have trouble saying no, when you're saying yes to others, make sure you're not saying no to yourself. Because I know that every time you say yes to something, you're automatically saying no to something else anyway, which could be a home-cooked meal or going to the gym or being on time for a meeting that you really need to do because you're helping somebody else out at the last minute, or not reading your kiddie a story because you're late again. And so you have to be really conscious of what you're saying no to versus the yes. That would be one of the first things. So let's just focus on these 2-2-1 things. I'm going to take a sip of water as well. And then the first thing. So the first thing to say more, and I spoke to 2 women earlier, and I know that I won't say to them, but using people's names and using your name more is really strategic. Popping it in emails more. If you ever top and tail your email, well, if you don't, I would suggest that that's another issue, because if you just go bang on somebody's screen and then they go bang on yours, unless it's a quick banter, you're not always going to have to say, dear so-and-so, I hope the weather's good with you. But to actually have an opener, an easy opener, is so important. And using people's names more than you perhaps do already. So, for example, I was chatting with Catherine and Jyoti earlier, and just initially saying your full name is a big piece about being remembered. So often you'll hear people say, oh yes, hi, it's Kay, or hey, it's Caroline, versus, Kay White, Caroline Humphreys, actually introducing yourself. Jumping on a call using your name more. Or hi, it's, Kay from London, or hi, it's Kay, not even from London, versus hi, it's Kay White from London, being very clear about that it was me speaking up, and then putting your point across. So if you switch that as well, using other people's names is a strategy. You get people's attention much more easily. They feel that you've heard them, they feel more connected to you. And when, for example, someone's going off on a tangent, you can pull them back with their name. That's interesting, John. And you hear versus like, John, will you just please, you hold the moment with that person. So Dale Carnegie, who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People, he said, remember, if you remember my name, you pay me a subtle compliment. I can never remember all of it. You indicate I have made an impression on you. Remember my name, and you add to my feeling of importance. So, for example, I'm not saying that you sound like a sort of parrot, oh, Jane, isn't that interesting, Jane? And how are you today, Jane? And I'd like to do that, Jane. Will you include me on that, Jane? Jane will think you've lost the plot. But if you involve, so Jane, that's interesting, actually. That reminds me of blah, 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 blah. And then a little bit later, you know what, Jane, I'm going to do so-and-so. It's a natural thing that you do, but that person feels more connected. And when you write it, it works as well, in a sort of every other paragraph, or certainly top and bottom. And it cuts through the noise and it connects you. And what I will also say, as far as cutting through the noise, is I'm going to share a quick story with you about Susanna, who, one of my clients, who was really needed to get the attention of her. Well, she was a supplier, that's right. So she was a supplier, a catering supplier. So she was her budgets were all negotiated by the company. And so this woman who worked for the company would sit there like this in these meetings on her BlackBerry. We found out that she was playing Angry Birds, which at the time was very popular. But Susanna would be trying to get her attention and trying to get approval on things and trying to have input. And so I said, let's just try using her name. Let's call her, I think her name was Liz. Let's call her. And it was like magic. So Liz, tell me, so Liz, just to make sure this is okay with you, what do you think? Using her name, she sat up. And in meetings, when you're running meetings, using, so many people will say, any questions? And most people will. Versus, okay, so what questions do we have? That's the first thing. And who'd like to, what do you think? You kick us off, Catherine. Using, and not being like, but just using people's name. And you know what happens? Everyone else sits up because they're thinking, oh my gosh, she might throw the ball to me. I better listen. So again, it's actually a strategy that is so underestimated. It's subtle. Saying thank you more. When that man, David, who gave me a gift, because he's given me a story about saying that the subject was boring, or sounding boring, that was the accent at the time as well, in the Austrian embassy, he said these words, and I had that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, the ground might open up, and I did say, thank you. I said, okay, well, thank you, David, because I'd met him before, and he was right on the other end. Thank you, David. Let me get going, and let's have a chat afterwards, and see if or how you might have been right, but let me get going for the benefit of everybody in the room. But saying thank you grounded me. It takes about 3 or 4 seconds to say it in a very intentional way. And then you have your power back. You have your kind of versus apologizing. Can you hear how I could have apologized? And, oh, well, I'm sorry, and I hope it'll be more, trust me, and making me all scattered. So using thank you to actually steady yourself, even if you really want to throttle the person, well, thank you for that. Because then you remember, okay, this is about respect, this is about me, I'm not giving my power away to you in this moment. And so I would say that you go there first, you acknowledge it, even if you don't like what you've heard, and it grounds you again in this energy of respect versus being all reactive and apologetic or thrown off your game. And one of the very subtle things about saying thank you is to say thank you in advance. So, for example, if I say to you, will you share with me that so-and-so about, one of you had said you're going to send me a recipe, the British Bake Off, and you'll send it to me by Friday. I would say, let me use Jyoti as I know her name. So Jyoti, thank you so much for saying you're going to send me that invitation or that recipe on Friday. You hear I'm telling her what she's doing in advance. And you have to think, okay, yes, Kay, I am sending you that recipe. So thanking someone in advance, thank you so much for saying you'll get that to me by Friday. Brilliant. Shall I follow up with you Wednesday? But thanking them in advance, it's commitment. That's a persuasion and an influencing skill. It's commitment. Thanking someone in advance for saying that they do something. And Mary Kay Ash, who was a fantastic writer and who started the sort of equivalent of Avon for black women, black skin, she had a phrase that said, treat everybody as if they have an invisible sign around their neck that says, I want praise and recognition. I mean, we all know people that really, you don't think they need praise and recognition, shouldn't have it, they have too much of it, but actually, this is about you keeping yourself centered and grounded and assertive, not about being apologetic and giving all your power to other people, but actually, thank you for that, that's interesting. Even if you don't like what you've heard, I want you to be able to understand that you can buy yourself all sorts of favours and also things happening by using those words. Well, thanks for that. Can you tell how you don't know what I think, even if you really irritated me? Okay, thank you for that. I'll tell you another really good word that's just popped up to me. When you say the word wow, when someone says, oh, something so-and-so's happened, and you might say, oh, no, but for them it might be actually good. If you say, oh, wow, you don't know what I mean, do you? It's very subtle. So again, this is buying time before you commit yourself. They're saying, oh, no, that sounds awful. And that when in fact, actually, the person's saying, well, actually, it's okay, you know, I'm okay about it. Whereas you've committed your energy. So often I'll say, oh, wow, okay, you know, tell me a bit more. Oh, wow. But you don't know what I'm thinking. And this is the thing, we often give ourselves, you know, make ourselves so open that we're often put off our game, I would say. So this is a client of mine, Summer. And Summer said to me that she had missed out on probably, I can't remember how much it was at the time, it was tens of thousands of increases in salary and bonuses based on not putting herself across properly. She used to talk about pitching her ideas. I said to her, do you pitch ideas? Doesn't really sound like you. Tell me about that. She said, oh, it's a phrase that's used around me all the time. And I said, well, what do you mean by it? She said, well, you know, and I said, what are you actually trying to do when you're pitching an idea? And of course, it isn't what she was trying to do at all, throw something at someone really hard. And it's a very masculine term that isn't hers. And so this is this thing about understanding the words that you're using. So what she was actually trying to do was get an idea across and get buy-in to an idea. And that's far more specific and far more interesting for her brain to try and work out. Interestingly, I was speaking at a group actually of men the other day, because with respect to the smart men in the room, I do actually work with quite a few men who need this kind of input as well, but often don't know how to ask about it. And also, let's be honest, it's much more, women are much more supported naturally than often men are. And this group of accountants actually said to me, and one of them said to me, it's okay, how do you pitch at a client and then pounce? I was like, you don't? How do you pitch at a client and then pounce? I mean, the energy of that is so wrong on every level. And I said to him, well, tell me this. Do you like being pitched at and then pounced on? Because, you know, if you're going to buy a car and the car salesman gets a hint that you might like the blue one and you want an estate, and he pounces, you don't want that. So again, being very mindful of the energy that you're using and mindful of the time as well. Just, you know, if you take nothing else from today, I know that to actually consider, pitch, whose words am I using? If you find that something jars on you when you're saying it, then pay attention to it. What's another one? What do I really mean? Who have I picked that up from, and do I actually like it? And does it represent me? Because you're just becoming like a voice box for somebody else, pitching ideas if that's not what you're actually trying to do. So the first thing to watch out for, I'm going to keep us going because of the trapdoor, is the word but. This is the banana skin. It's really easy to negate everything you've said that was positive by using the word but. And I do speak French, sorry about this, I do speak French, so I understand that the French version of this is exactly the same. And the idea is that putting that picture of a big eraser up there is because but is the great eraser. I want you to remember that. In my book, B is for but, because I just know how important it is. That report was great. You look really well. I love how you did that. Thanks for that. I'd love to be there. But you can hear it's coming. And we're all kind of waiting for it, thinking, okay, you know, I love that report. Where's the but? And so what you have to remember is when you say, I love that report, but it went on too long at the end, people only remember it went on too long. You look really well, but obviously you had a late night last night or something. And they just remember the last bit. I love how you did that, but, and it's just, why do this? Because people are put on the defensive. So what I would suggest, and someone actually said to me, it's like a bomb going off in the sentence, boom, because it raises the first bit and people are just left with it went on too long, you look tired, it's going to be really hard. You know, because I heard someone say at a meeting, Anne, we've got this really exciting opportunity. We're going to make a lot of money next year, but it's going to be really hard. They're going to be long late nights. Can you remember? You can feel what everyone else is remembering versus it's going to be a tough time. There's going to be probably long overtime and late nights, but it's going to be exciting. We're going to hit our budgets. We'll probably hit them in the first 3 months. Can you imagine? So this is what I suggest you do. You either flip it, which is what I've just done, or you build a bridge with the word and. So say, for example, you start this afternoon and think, oh my gosh, that woman with the big sparkly necklace, she said so-and-so. about this work, and I've already started. So you say and instead. So that report was great, and trails off a bit at the end. You hear it still sounds, but it doesn't sound so, but, that here comes the bad stuff. So that report was great, and, or this is going to be, really exciting, and it will mean quite a few late nights. So it kind of stays centered. There's an energetic connection that's still there. And the other thing that I suggest is that you flip it. So you start off, and when you're writing this, it's much easier because you can be conscious of how you put it across. But saying, and it is but saying, at the first bit, the harder bit, if you will, that report actually trailed off a bit, and it needs to be tightened. But overall, it was brilliant, and you've done a really great job. But overall, we're on track. You hear it feels different, doesn't it? And you're like, okay, well, I'll tighten it up at the end, and you haven't negated the first bit. So it's a subtlety, and this is my client Anne, who I was just sharing with you, who was so excited about her £100 million project. But I heard her sort of crushing the energy in the room with, but it's going to be hard, and but there's going to be so many late nights. So it's just a subtlety that I want you to have. This is the second thing, the second banana skin. It's very simple. I'm going to just take a sip of water again. I advocate questions, and Q in my book is Q for questions, the power of open and closed questions and why to use them, when to use which, and the effect of what happens. You know when you don't know what to say? Someone actually said to me, oh, I go to networking meetings, I never know what to tell people. So that was a clue. I was thinking, those people don't want you to tell them things. They want to talk about themselves and have a connection. They don't want you to stand there like a big sort of hot air extractor pushing air at them. So I said, well, how often do you use questions? What do you mean? So I said, well, how often do you ask people questions about themselves? What made you come here? What industry? What made you choose that industry? Being curious, using questions. Why is the question to watch out for? So if I was to say to Adelaide, because she won't mind me playing with her, Adelaide, why is today important for you?
I think it's important for the women to come together and to get an external person to come in to speak with them.
Okay. So if I said to you, what makes today important for you? What's the difference in the energy?
I guess it's more, I suppose, looking at it in a greater detail and what effect it would have then on why I would actually want to do it.
Because why sends you to slightly justify. This is the subtlety. I could have said, I have said before, and I wouldn't play with you, why are you wearing rust today? And a lot of times people will say, because I like it, or because it suits me, or often you'll make people say because, and this is the point of why. Why is this important? Why have you done that? Why haven't you finished that yet? Why have you put that there? We do it at home. I don't anymore. When I do, I'm like, because I know the effect. It's justification. So if you're trying to find something out, why did you start that? Why did you start there? Why haven't we done this yet? Versus, okay, so tell me where we're at with so-and-so. What does that mean? Or can you just explain a bit about this? Versus why. Because why sends people to justify. And I did actually ask at this Austrian embassy at that time, all those years ago, to one of these chaps who was closer to me, who hadn't said that it was boring. I did ask him, let me play with you, Benedict, I think his name was. Why are you wearing that tie? And he said, because it was the first thing I saw in the wardrobe. But he said, because. And I said to him, how's it feel? And he said, I feel put on the spot. That's the point, put on the spot. So being careful of how because you, as I say, when you make someone say because. So how I do use why, and this is the subtlety here, is you might be asking yourselves, why is she wearing blah, or why has she done so-and-so, or why did she leave Willis, or whatever it is. That's how you use it. And my response to you would be, can you hear? So it's very assertive. You might be asking yourself why, and so you use it, and then you answer it yourself. But it's when you put it across to other people, why have you done that? Why haven't you started that? Why are we going in that direction? So this is what I wanted to share with you. And I leave you that image of the fences, because you're putting people on the defensive, and you don't want to do that. Not if you want to keep them open to you and you want to find out what's going on. So we're going to do something together. This is something that I know makes such a difference. I'm going to share with you the power of posture. And I always see women sit up a little straighter when I say it. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. It's because of the energy that you have. If I was to say to you, and I'll put this down just in case I break something. If I was to be standing here in front of you, and I'm 6 foot tall, so I'm quite hard to miss, and I've had to have my own work through being 6 foot tall and being noticed and being handed furniture when smaller girls are, I'll sit here and it's like, oh, well, you can do that yourself, Kate. So I've had my own journey. I'm married to someone who's 5'6", so it isn't an issue in my world because he was like, hey, I can always find her in a crowd. And the point about it is posture when you're 6 foot tall is hugely important because I could have slumped. But can you imagine the difference if I'd said to you, and Adelaide had introduced me, and I'd stood here and shut myself down? Or, as so many people do, and you've seen it, hung onto the lectern for dear life because I might fall over. Giving yourself, and it takes practice, and this, like everything, like the twisty-turny road, being conscious of how you hold yourself. And often women are like, oh, but my boobs, and I don't know what to do with everything. But actually, this is where our energy is. This is where so much of our power is. What's the difference when I do that to myself? Just shout out.
You're closed.
I look
Your body language is closed.
closed. Do I look, how confident do I look? Even with all the glitter and all of the bells and whistles, I've lost. I would have had to have worked so much harder. So they say, and there's this fantastic TED talk, I recommend Amy Cuddy, C-U-D-D-Y. She's not fake it until you make it, she's fake it until you become it. Because there's a kind of, this whole idea of holding yourself straight, sitting up in meetings, taking a moment in a pose like this on your own, not in the meeting like this necessarily, because that has a different effect. But having a moment and thinking it's important, I need to show up properly, I need to sit straight, I need to lean forward. I understand. Men will often take up more space, no offence, but they will, sit like this and spread out. And we tend to make ourselves small and be polite, and it doesn't serve us. So that is what I would invite you to do. And for those of you who are sitting up a little straighter with her shoulders back, and I will say to you, I have worked with someone, and I said to her, tell me about the posture, and she said, I have spent years slumped over, and my neck has actually got stuck like this. I don't, because I've been so slumped. So I would really invite you to consider, this is where your diaphragm, your voice is deeper here, you're not all breathless, speaking up here, giving yourself more breath by holding yourself. And this works just as well sitting down. Now, I'm not always like this at home. It would be very scary for my poor husband. But I do recognise, so I will often hold conference calls, and I'll stand up. No one else knows. My dogs might know, but no one else knows because of the energy that I can pull up from me. So if you have an office or you're taking a call at home and it's important, you have your notes, but you don't have to sit down. You can use the energy of being able to stand up. Just these things count. So, let's keep moving. We've whistled through stories, which I know are so important, but also because they make sense to you. They give you context and things. I'm not just giving you loads of facts, and I didn't want that for you because I've sat through so many things like that. Some of these stories will stay with you, and you'll find yourself quoting them or using, of course. So, the two things to do more, use people's names and say thank you, to buy yourself time and commitment. The two things to avoid, or be very mindful of, why and but, and be careful of how you're using them because they have an effect. And the one thing to do more in the moment, your posture, and give yourself permission, if you will, to shine. Because we pay more attention and give more credit to someone who's more like this than like that. And I feel really different like this. I'd find it very hard to say very much like this because I can feel I haven't got much energy. So, very briefly, Adelaide and I have talked about a date on the 21st of October, and I know, Adelaide, you'll be sharing this. So for everyone around the world as well, we can work out how this could work. You can call in on the 21st of October at 12:30 UK, and I will be there. And any questions, hey, I noticed this, and so often women will come on and say, I tried the why on my husband. It was a miracle. He told me what was going on. I tried it on my children. So just, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be all you being hard-nosed and saying I negotiated a 100% salary increase in the last 2 weeks. Great if you did. So that's 2 weeks yesterday, and Adelaide will send you the details, and I'll be on the call to answer your questions, share some feedback, maybe a bit of a reminder and a refresher, but that would be a pleasure. And we'll record it as well if it means anyone has to miss it. And the final thing, Caroline has something to give everybody. I have an opportunity for those of you who would like to stay more connected, who would like to receive a copy of a recording about saying no without saying no, being more assertive with your boundaries, how to say no without saying anything, so how you use your body language to say no, enough, I'm off, and also how to say, how to think about what you're doing when you're saying no, and then how to put the responsibility on some of the things that get thrown your way on other people. So if you would like a copy of this recording and to stay connected with me, you will receive that via email. Then it's a very simple thing. There is a summary sheet here, which Caroline's about to hand out, where you can just drop your email address. If you leave your BT email address, please be careful to check your spam, because it comes from a system, or often women will leave their personal email address. I do not send out loads of emails. It isn't my style, but you will receive a newsletter where I'll share with you more of these kind of tips. There also is a box to tick that says, Kay, I would like to hear about your event. Again, it's very non-committal on both our sides, but if you'd like a bit more information in advance. And then there's another box, and I can only offer 11 of these. I chose 11 because it's a nice number. If you would like to tick that box and think, you know what, she said some things here that are going on for me, and you would like to hop on a private call with me, there is an application form. If you tick the box, you'll be sent an application. 5 simple questions. What's actually going on? What's the effects? What does it mean day to day? And we will hop on a call if you send this back. The first 11 of you that send this back, I would send it anyway. I certainly would do the questions, even if we don't hop on a call. It helps you get clearer. So a Be Heard Now action session with me at a time that works for both of us. And we will hop on a call together, and I will dig in and ask you some of those questions that you might not have asked yourself. So for those of you who would like to stay in touch, and also for those of you on the webcast, you'll see there a link which Adelaide is going to send out to you if you don't have to cut it down now. And the link has the questions as well, so if you'd like, there's a box to tick, and you can just send it back, and I will send it to you from wherever you are in the world. So I have one more message to leave with you. Please hand your forms to Caroline as you leave. It would be good to stay connected for those of you who in this 45-minute whistle-stop tour have heard some things that apply to them. This is what I will say to you. Napoleon Hill wrote, Think and Grow Rich. It is always your next move, or it is always your move, not waiting for everyone else. Sometimes choosing to wait and just hang on is a move in itself, because it's a decision, it's not passive. But actually thinking that you have to wait for other people all the time, or wait for permission, or wait for being ready to get ready and all of this, it's actually making your move. It's always your next move. So, thank you for your time, your energy, and your presence today. And I hope the things I've shared with you will help you this very afternoon. So, thank you all.